It brings me great pleasure to welcome into the show current Fijian Drua head coach Mick Byrne. It's awesome to have you on, mate, and obviously it's a huge weekend ahead for Fijian Rugby, but before we look ahead, I thought we'd kick things off by getting your opinion on the performances of the team so far. Just how impressed have you been with the side and their efforts to this stage?
Oh, great to be on. Yeah, look, I think the first two games were really impressive when when they set themselves up and the way they went about their job and really stuck to the systems and the discipline and scored some great tries and defended well. And I was very, very impressed with the way they've gone about their business. They had three good games here. They've gone in, had a good couple of games leading into the World Cup and started the World Cup on fire. So, they've done a really good job and they've got themselves into the quarterfinal. And as we all know, it all starts again now.
Yeah, it certainly does. You mentioned there the discipline and the defence, and to me, Fiji, they've always had that natural flair, that outstanding skill set, tight forwards that can run like backs, and they have the ability to make something out of nothing. But for me, it's been those developments in those other areas you mentioned that has really kind of taken them to the next level. How do you think the introduction of the Drua to Super Rugby and players getting exposure now to higher quality competition more consistently, do you think that's helped this national side develop in those areas?
Yeah, look, I think they've always had a great 15. There's no question about that. There's a lot of guys that have left the islands and gone and played in France, doing a great job, and they've become professional rugby players. And I think the advent of the Drua has allowed that next tier of players on the island to develop a professionalism. And, at the end of our second year, our players have learnt what it means to be a professional rugby player. They do their work, they do their homework, they do their clarity at the beginning of the week, they execute at the end of the week, and they've got themselves fit and look after themselves. So they've learnt the professionalism, and I think that's been a good addition to what was already a pretty talented sort of top 15, if you like, national team. And as we've seen in this World Cup, those top league players from France they're devastating. And the Drua boys have been able to slot in there in a very professional way. And I think the combination of the two environments now has added real value to the Flying Fijians.
When I think of standout wins from across the tournament, Fiji beating the Wallabies for the first time since 1954 is the game that jumps out to me. And obviously being an Australian and having worked with the Wallabies, I can imagine you were on the fence about this one. But how big of a result was that for Fijian rugby as a whole, knocking off a team held in such high regard in world rugby?
Yeah, look, I think it was awesome. I think, you say sitting on the fence, but I am sort of, from a point of view of when the game started, there was no question. I wasn't sitting on any fence, so I was pretty wrapped with the Flying Fijians. I think one of the key things there for us has been a number of players. There's an element of Australian that don't know about the Northern Hemisphere guys, and that's always a challenge for teams. When you go into a World Cup, you're going in against guys you've got to do a bit of homework on, and so there would have been a few of the Flying Fijians the Australian guys weren't aware of. But the other side of it is our Drua players had played a couple of years against the Australians, so there was no sort of air of expectation around, these guys are, they're a tier one country. Our guys have gone in against them for the last couple of years, so I think that helped relax them and get them focused on the game rather than the external noise of playing a tier one country as such, even though they were above them on the ladder. In the past, there's been that element of, in the 2019 World Cup, Fiji got out to a great start, but then, Australia, Wallabies wore them down and got away with a good win. And the fact that the Drua players have been, used to playing good, solid 80 minutes now, that's one of the things we've worked on is that fitness. The Northern Hemisphere guys are playing hard rugby every week, so the combination of the two guys meant they were always going to play a good 80 minutes of football. And I think the challenge was going to be Australia had some real X-factor players if they could get their game together. And defensively, I thought Fijians did. We did a great job, held Australia out, and then we scored a couple of good tries ourselves. So, it was a great victory, and obviously getting that victory set up the World Cup for us.
Yeah, it certainly did. And whenever you hear the players speak to media, they talk about how bonded this team is as a group and they want to make the country proud. Obviously, in your current role, you would have witnessed this firsthand as well. But can you speak a little on the Fijian rugby culture and just how important it is for these players to represent their nation to the best of their ability, because they play with such huge amounts of passion and pride, don't they? It's almost similar to some of these European sides we're seeing.
Yeah, I think when you talk about culture, one of the things that was really attractive for me as a coach to come here, because it's something you don't have to talk about. There's a lot of teams I've worked with over the years. If you've tried to find your identity, you've tried to find your culture, and you try and build that as a team. Whereas here, their identity and culture is ingrained in them, and so it was just a matter of helping them understand what it means to be a professional rugby player, because deep down their religion, their faith and family are massive parts, and that's already ingrained in them from when they were little kids. So the faith and family culture is strong. They live it every day. You can see them. You can see them before and after games with their hymns, and they get together. And it was great when the Northern Hemisphere Fijians came here, and they went off to the island and slept on the mattresses on the floor and got back into village life. A lot of our guys in Drua players, they've been doing that anyway over the last few years, and they're still part of their villages. Whereas the Northern Hemisphere guys, especially those that have been away for 5, 6, 7 or 8 years, came back, and it was a real grounding for them to go back into the village and just remember and just get the feeling of and remembering where they came from as little kids. And I think it was massive for them to be able to go back and experience that as one group. And I was here at the time, and they were training here, playing before they went away, and then when they came back, you could see just in the gym that they'd actually become a tighter group just on that week away. So it was a pretty good thing that Simon organised for everyone.
You mentioned before the performance of the 23 throughout this tournament, and a few pundits have kind of mentioned the possibility of fatigue starting to creep into the camp after that loss to Portugal. Do you see that playing a factor? They've obviously had to roll out a pretty similar side because their pool games were such important must-win games, or do you think it was more just Portugal rising to the occasion and playing a great brand of footy?
Well, I think there's some elements of quite a lot of things at play. I think you're right. If they'd been able to score a bonus point win against Georgia, and that would have given them the opportunity to rest some of the players, but with a must-win game, which they didn't get against Portugal. But I think the key, when you look at it, I think when I look at them play against Georgia, it looked like they went out with a mindset of, and the playing group particularly sort of had a mindset of getting the bonus point. And so we had the tight head prop having a tap and go and all those things, which is part of the thing that we had at the Drua was, when we are in a position where we're expected to either win the game or we get in front, it looks like we're going to run away with it, we do tend to get a little bit loose. And I look at the Drua over the last 12 months where sides behind us like Moana, and no disrespect to them, but Moana, the Highlanders, the Rebels really took it to us in games, and then we would beat the Crusaders and Hurricanes at the other end of the ladder. So it's just that element that they're just learning now about professionalism, is they're no longer the underdog, and so the better you get, the higher expectation there is on you. So I think it's all great learnings for the players, and they won't have any trouble getting up for England. That'll be a game where they probably are the underdogs, and that'll gear them up, and they'll be totally focused. And having beaten them before the World Cup started, that'll put them in great place mentally, and it'll be awesome to see them go at them on Sunday.
Yeah, well, speaking of that game, obviously, like you mentioned, they beat England not long ago, and I think all the neutral fans will be cheering for Fiji, that's for sure, because it's fair to say England haven't exactly captured the hearts of imagination with the style of footy they're playing. But what for you will be the keys to Fiji getting the win? You mentioned not getting too loose there. I guess if you give England opportunities in your 22, they will make you pay, whether it be 3 or 5?
Yeah, look, I think the crowd will certainly be supporting us. I was in the Six Nations for 4 years, and England weren't the French favourite, so I think the non-partisan crowd will be certainly behind the Fijian boys. But I think the key is probably to look after the kicking game, and they did that well. They exited well, and they received their kicks well against England the first time round. So that'll be another thing, and then also to be really disciplined, because we saw what Ford did to Argentina in the early stages, where I think Argentina were doing a great job, but he ended up knocking over I think 4 or 5 drop goals. So England, that's what England will do if you give them territory. So the key there is going to be discipline and just keep them away from your 22, and I think the boys will have enough firepower at times to open up England, and it's then just a matter of making sure that England don't get too many points on the board.
We spoke before about the culture and the importance of rugby in Fijian culture. How big would it be for Fijian rugby if this team can advance into a Rugby World Cup semi-final? A feat that, probably 18 months ago, not many would have considered possible, right?
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the November tour last year, they were struggling a little bit. There was coming out of COVID was a challenge, for the team, because the players on the island were locked away. They couldn't do anything. And there was a real development void here on the island. No one did anything from October 2020. So, there was a real void of games. And then when they went to the November tour, the team got COVID. I think they had to postpone or cancel a game because of COVID. And, there was that real disruption to the side. And, I think people looked and went, well, what's happening there? But then this year, Byrne left, and then, Simon's come in, and brought back in the sort of Fijian culture, and those guys now are in a great shape. And, if they can win, definitely they can win. And, not the if, but, if they win this game on the weekend, well, I know what my little village area around me will be, because I hear them every morning. Like last week it was 7 in the morning. The week before that it was 4 in the morning. You can hear them all around the village, chahooing. So the place will be electric, and I think what it'll do is it'll really put Fiji on the map, and it'll put them in a position where the Southern Hemisphere, organisation would definitely have to look at them as a growth part of, say, the Rugby Championship. When they're looking to restructure or realign what's happening down here around that international window, certainly, by having a success on Saturday or Sunday, will certainly put that on the boardroom tables.
Yeah, 100%. And it's fair to say if the All Blacks were to take on Fiji this week, I'd probably feel nervous for the first time in our history. But really appreciate your time and insight there, Mick. It was great to speak to you, ahead of this week's big game. Fingers crossed they can pull off the win, and you're hearing plenty of chahoos in your neighbourhood. But enjoy the game, mate, and hopefully another historic back-to-back wins over England. How good.
Yeah, that'd be, what a tremendous last 2 months that'd be for Fiji rugby and the Fijian community. So, yep, he's looking forward to a great weekend.
SENZ, it's Kiwi for Sport.